Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Welcome back to the Muslim Mental Health Podcast, brought to you by Project Taqwa. My name is Qasim.
My name is Imaan.
My name is Mayce.
So you guys might not have met Mayce yet, but you will in just a second. So Mayce is one of our newest members. You want to give us a quick intro?
Yeah, sure. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. My name is Mayce. Like Qasim said, I'm fairly new to the team. I joined end of December. Alhamdulillah. Very excited to be with you guys today. I'm fairly new to the mental health field. I've been practicing in the field since 2023, and I work for a company that is pretty unique in the sense that I get to work in two different facilities. So I work in private practice, and then we also have a psychiatric hospital with a PHP program and an inpatient facility. And so I get to work with all different populations and a variety of mental health disorders, and excited to be on this podcast with you guys for the first time. Alhamdulillah.
Great. We're so excited to have you, and inshallah to hear all of your perspectives and through your experience. So inshallah, this will be a good one.
Inshallah, it'll be good. As you guys know, this is a little bit more of a heavier, denser topic. Again, just take any time that you need when listening to this, watching this. But inshallah, we'll just get started. It's been a long few months, and I know we haven't put out a podcast in that time. And just in general, we've just been gathering our own thoughts. Before we get fully into it, do you guys have as therapists, as just Muslims, how have you guys been feeling? How has been the sense for you guys over the last, I don't even know how many more days at this point, but yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to be honest. I lost count of how many takes because of how heavy this topic is. As soon as we all started talking, we were literally shaking. I felt that weight in my chest. It's hard to talk about, yet alone process it. I think everybody's brain and body, the alarm just feels like it's on overload. The anxiety feels like it's on overload. Our brains pretty much feel like they're on fire. And I think one of the big reasons for that is that everybody here was already experiencing their own trauma just because we're human and this is the reality of life. And, we have our own stuff that we're navigating through that happened prior to what's going on in Palestine, what's going on in Gaza. And so we're already trying to figure that out. We've all got our day-to-day issues, whether it be family issues or relationship issues or financial issues or job issues. And so you've got that stuff, and then you're still trying to figure that out. And then all of a sudden, everything that's going on in Palestine starts up, and it just feels like the cherry on top of the sundae of problems. It's been hard. It's been heavy. I don't know about everybody else, but I feel like it's been hard to experience joy a lot of the times, as dark as that might sound. But it's just that, we try to find there's blessing in everything. There's khair in everything. There's good in everything. But at the same time, just living life and having all the blessings that we have. I think a lot of people have been experiencing a lot of guilt, a lot of frustration. It's been so long that we might even start to feel like we might be a little bit numb. And we'll talk about that, inshallah, just why that happens. Because I think when everything first started, it was more so crying spells and, just constantly going through the motions and feeling every single bit of it. And now we've been exposed to it so much that I don't want to say it's starting to become normalized, because it's absolutely not normal, but that it's just becoming such a regular part of our lives that we're starting to become numb to it. So it's been hard. I don't know how else to say it except that it's been really hard.
Yeah. And like you said, just such a shared feeling of guilt that we're all experiencing. And, I know for me, it's really hard to kind of just carry on with my day-to-day normal life, being, in a very comfortable, safe place while, we're struggling with, watching and seeing everything that's going on in Palestine, and not even for just this however many amount of days since October, but for years, right? So it's not something that's been new by any means. And so it kind of just reminds you sometimes that, we live in such a comfortable life, but there is so much more going on in this world. And, I know it brings up for a lot of people just a sense of, we really want to, get involved, do something about it and do as much as possible. But then it's also that, dichotomy of also feeling helpless and, struggling to know what we can do and feeling productive and, just, holding all those feelings can be so overwhelming. And so I think sometimes it's just, I think overwhelming is the best word to put it.
Yeah. I mean, you guys hit the nail on the head. While we've been away, we've had a lot of community support groups, healing circles, mostly at college campuses. And you guys talked about a lot of the feelings that we've been seeing. Helplessness is probably the number one thing. And it's hard to digest helplessness when it's continuous in this way. where, alhamdulillah, we've seen some small victories with Chicago passing the ceasefire. We've seen those victories, and it's honestly, it does bring you joy, because like these things were not happening. You could not imagine this 10 years ago when everything was happening in 2012, 2013, right? Could not imagine it at all. So the support has been overwhelming too. So I do want to highlight that. But at the same time, there's this vast helplessness when you open Instagram, you open Twitter, and you see things that aren't normally to be seen, that should not be seen by the human eye, and probably has not been seen on high definition video ever. Just some of the brutalities, right? How can we navigate just that empty, gutted feeling of helplessness? Just because it is so overwhelming, it can become debilitating. I can't even speak right, but yeah.
Debilitating,
Yeah, debilitating, yeah.
You know, and it's so hard too, because I think you bring up such a good point of, you know, we see these images and it's, you know, like you said, it's so jarring and, you know, so difficult to look at. And it's almost, you know, another part of you is like, you know, I don't want to stop looking at these pictures, because it also is such a reminder, and, you know, it kind of shows us what's happening. And, you know, it also instills that in us of wanting to do something and act, you know, be people in this community that are doing something. But it's all it's a tough thing to navigate. I think that's, you know, a lot of, I think how we can encapsulate how we're feeling is that there's so many opposing feelings, like of guilt, but also wanting to, you know, be active and do something, but also, you know, feeling guilty of our situation. And, you know, there's just so many different things. So I think I've experienced what you're saying so much. And I think hopefully, you know, I bet people can relate as well. And yeah, Mayce, I don't know if you have any comments on that too.
Well, there's a lot to unpack here. I'm definitely experiencing that helplessness myself. And I think as time goes on, it almost seems to just magnify everything, and it just keeps getting deeper and deeper and deeper. I will say, with that sense of helplessness, definitely doing whatever we can to advocate for the Palestinians, whether it be going to protests or, you know, joining different organizations that will help you become more of an activist in your community. But also, I think the biggest thing for me that's been helping me through this time is community. I think just surrounding myself with friends and family where we can just all sit around, we can all vent, and it's like whatever it is that you want to bring to the table, however it is that you're feeling, just put it out there, because when you keep it all bottled up inside, it only gradually gets worse. And so I think surrounding myself with community, with people who feel like an exhale to me, is something that's been really helpful, alhamdulillah. But then I think when it comes to helplessness, one of the most important things to remember is the power of dua. And I think that this is a time where people might even be feeling really helpless in their faith, of like, you know, all those questions come up of like, why is God allowing something like this to happen? Why is this happening to the Palestinians? But to also keep in mind too that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God, has wisdom in every single thing that he does, and every single thing that he does is khair, and every single thing that he does is good, and every single thing that he does is out of his love and wisdom. And part of the test for us and for the people of Palestine is to see that and see through that, you know, see through the filter that the world has on, of see past the illusion of this world, and to remember that me praying for the Palestinians is one of the most powerful things that I can do. Do not underestimate the power of prayer. But, you know, it's a patience thing. That's kind of the reality of the whole dunya, the reality of this world. It's, are you going to trust Allah? Are you going to trust God? Are you going to trust him when things are unfolding and you just don't understand what the heck is happening? And so I think just channeling all of our grief and all of our sadness and all of our helplessness into dua is something that's been really helpful, and just trying to keep the faith up and surrounding ourselves with people who help us keep the faith up.
Yeah, I think you brought up a beautiful point. I think, again, not to be a Debbie Downer, just to kind of get more insight from you guys, but alhamdulillah, I think at this point we've seen just a surge in Imaan, surge in growth as a community. Like, I feel like we're not strangers to each other anymore. I feel like we have like there's this underlying bond between us that now that we can kind of put things to the side and finally just embrace one another in a time of trial. But I know we've been saying that since October 7th and 8th and 9th, of just the power of making dua. And I know there's might be people that might be feeling like, okay, like I've been making it, but we're nearing Ramadan and it doesn't seem like there's an end in sight. So what's kind of, and there's an anxiety that comes with that, right? There's an anxiety of just like what I'm doing isn't helping. And that kind of goes back to the helplessness part. But again, like obviously extrapolating from that, dua is powerful in all ways, whether in this world or the next. So, but talking about that anxiety, like how can we combat that, especially when we are out there protesting, out there making dua, connecting with people in our community, and we have those moments of brevity, but at the same time, like, there's that just underlying anxiety that kind of just cuts through us. And what can we talk about that from?
Yeah, I think there's two things, like, I'll say to comment on this. The first thing, when we think about it, like, Islamically, like you were saying, like, I think something that I tell myself that brings me a lot of peace is that, you know, Ramadan, like, comes when we most need it, right? You know, I feel like so many people experience this, where even right before Ramadan, you feel a lot of times just very low, a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of things that might be happening externally and internally. And, you know, there's that concept that, you know, Ramadan does come when we most need it. And so, you know, that sometimes just that thought of that kind of gives me a little bit of motivation to be like, you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sending all these things, and, you know, these things are happening, and he's also giving us Ramadan to now, you know, do as much as we can to be, you know, constantly making that dua and doing so much we can during this month, this extremely blessed month. And I think it almost instills kind of a little bit of motivation for me, especially there. But then thinking about it also through a mental health perspective, another thing I wanted to comment on is that I think for me, what sometimes helps me is that, you know, when we are in these moments of helplessness and we're doing so much, you know, in our power, whether it be, you know, constantly reposting on social media or going to protests and, you know, signing all those petitions, which amazing, alhamdulillah, like, for everyone who's doing that. And sometimes, like Qasim said, it can feel helpless because you're like, okay, I'm doing these things and it doesn't feel like anything's changing. And I think one thing that I encourage people to do is that when you're experiencing that right away, is sometimes you need to kind of like take a step back and be like, you know, I think I need to, you know, work on my own self-care and just, you know, kind of give myself that moment to feel overwhelmed and kind of deal with my own anxiety in that moment before I'm putting myself out there externally to, like, you know, do the things I'm doing, you know, engage in protests and everything, which is amazing. But sometimes I feel like when we get very overwhelmed and just really stressed, like, we need to take a step back and kind of ground out ourselves in that moment. And if that means, like, you know, taking a small break from social media or taking a small break from kind of doing some of those things just to reorient ourselves, I think that's so important, because if we're looking after ourselves in those moments, it's so much easier to then be like, now I'm feeling a little bit, you know, better and more grounded, and I can go and do these things all over again and, you know, just engage in these things. So I would say really just engage in some of those forms of grounding, like whether that looks like engaging in, you know, self-care, taking that time, those breaks that we need from, you know, social media or anything, or just doing those things that, you know, bring you a lot of peace and ease your anxiety in that moment can be really helpful. So even just being intentional about that and taking that time for yourself is important.
Yeah, that's a really big one. And I'd love for us to, inshallah, elaborate on what those healthy self-care habits are. Because this is a moment where people can kind of feel like they're just going down a hole and can end up self-sabotaging, and it just makes the situation a whole lot worse. But then kind of going back to what Qasim brought up about how, you know, these are the moments where we might feel like, why is Allah not answering my du'as? Why is Allah not answering the du'as of the Palestinian? I've been praying and praying and praying, and, you know, it's been a while. It's end of February, and this has been going on since October. And to know that, like Imaan was saying, is giving yourself time to process everything. It is a lot, and that the response that you're having, if you are going through the whole, why is this happening, you know, questioning the circumstances, knowing that this is the pretty typical human reaction. And in fact, it's in the Quran that, you know, nations that came before us, when there'd be a lot of hardship, and it starts to get to a point where it's so suffocating. It's like, I feel like I can't breathe anymore. I feel like the walls are closing in on me. Is that, you know, people would ask, like, when is the help of Allah going to come? Where is the help of Allah? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responds to us, and he says, indeed, the help of Allah is near. I feel like the best answer that I could give for this is just one of my favorite stories ever. And it's because I think it can be applied to any single situation in life. And it's the story of Musa alayhi salam. It's the story of Prophet Moses, where, you know, he had a really anxiety-provoking life, and he was actually a pretty anxious human being. You know, if you were to diagnose him in the DSM, would be like generalized anxiety disorder, because he had a really, really anxious life. And one of the most anxiety-provoking moments of his life was when he was with Bani Israel. He was with his people, and they were fleeing from Fir'aun, literal tyrants, scariest dude ever. I mean, we want to talk about the stuff that's going on in Gaza, and talking about the oppressors. That was their version of an oppressor at the time. And, they were fleeing from him. And at the time, Musa alayhi salam and his people find themselves in front of the Red Sea, and Fir'aun and a superpower army are right behind them. And they're trapped. And actually the people of Bani Israel said that. They said, Inna lamudrakun, like surely we have been overtaken. And that's our moment right now. Everybody here right now has got their own Inna lamudrakun moment, where it's like, I've got my own trauma, I've got my own stuff going on, I've got this heaviness from my own personal life, and now I'm just experiencing this vicarious trauma that I'm watching every single day on my phone, and it feels like the world has turned their back on me and the world has turned their back on my people. They were in the same exact situation. And Musa alayhi salam's response is very powerful, and this is one of the key answers here. What does he say? He says, Inna ma'i rabbi sayahdin. He says, indeed, my Lord is with me and he will guide me. He doesn't know how the heck he's going to get out of that situation. Everything is just a dead end. It's just kind of like a pick the way you want to die. Like, do you want to drown or do you want to get killed by the humans behind you? He doesn't see the solution. And in that moment, he doesn't even flinch. Inna ma'i rabbi sayahdin. And that's what this is. I don't see the solution. I don't see, whatever mental health issues you might be dealing with right now that came as a result of your own personal life, because of any family issues, because of friend issues or relationship issues, financial issues. Like, this is the dunya, we're in the lowest life. We're in the lowest level. And so whatever it is that you're dealing with, and as we deal with that secondhand trauma of, seeing this genocide unfold in front of us every single day. Indeed, my Lord is with me and he will guide me. I don't see the solution. I don't know how the heck I'm going to get out of this situation, but I do know one thing, and it is indeed Allah is with me and he will guide me. And what happens? Musa alayhi salam takes his staff, he splits the sea. And, sometimes we get those moments where we get that relief, where we can practice those self-care habits that inshallah we can get into in a second, where we can take care of ourselves and we can get that ease. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most merciful. It's going to be hard here, but he's not going to let it get to a point where, we're completely breaking. I mean, obviously we need to pick ourselves up. We need to take care of ourselves. It's our efforts and then him taking care of the rest. But to know that we will see victory, inshallah. We will get ease in this world and we will 1000% get ease in the next. And so I think that's something, just to bring in an Islamic perspective in there, super important to keep in mind. And then inshallah, we'll move on to the next topic, but we'll get into healthy self-care habits and just how to take care of ourselves and each other from a psychological perspective.
For sure. Thank you for the points. You kind of stole my next question about, I wanted to really dive into just, people are dealing with a lot right now. And you talked about it. But there's just so much going on, family, financial, like anything. Just think of anything. We went to all these different college campuses, and that was kind of the recurring theme. It's just like, I have so much on my plate. I can't operate as a normal person. I don't want to take in my exams. I don't want to do this. I can't do that. I have family back in Gaza. I have this going on. Like, we've seen so many of these examples. What is the way to just kind of just reformulate and just gather ourselves back up and be able to operate in life before we can go ahead and go back to our protests, go back to our intense dua about this? But like, what's the way? What's the way out of like just handling both at the same time?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is a situation that I'm sure a lot of people are facing. And, I want to start off by saying I think it looks different for everyone. Like, I think there are many different things that, can be helpful for every single one of us. But I think the main thing I want to say is that it is so important during these times to really be intentional and look at ourselves intentionally. And sometimes it's hard because I think sometimes we get lost in ourselves and, we don't really, there's certain things like, for example, that all of us do, which is like second nature to us. We eat, we sleep at a specific time, we build certain habits, like it's ingrained in us. We don't almost think about why we do certain things. But, in a practice of like even just psychology or, I think it is important for all of us to kind of take a step back and start thinking intentionally about why we do certain things. why do I sleep at a certain time? Why do I eat the things that I eat? If I'm feeling sad or if I'm feeling like angry, like why do I cope with it in a specific way? Because sometimes, when we're putting the more intentional thought into these things, it can help us kind of, correct or maybe just improve upon the way that we handle outside stress, internal stress. Sometimes we might not do it in the healthiest way, and that's not our fault. We just maybe are doing it because we've, learned something throughout life, like, throughout our experiences, which is so normal. We all do it in certain ways, but I think, I would encourage everybody to kind of take a really intentional look at themselves and what that might be when it comes to self-care for like certain things, the things that we're facing in life right now because of what is going on in Palestine. Like, I think that can even be, if I'm getting overwhelmed, what does that overwhelmed look like? What does that anxiety look like? Because sometimes we don't even know. Like, if I'm anxious, like I might not always know that I'm anxious. Like, for example, for me, when I get anxious, I can start feeling it in my stomach, like maybe just like butterflies in my stomach, or, I get a headache, or there's certain physical things that happen in my body, but there can also be like, mental things or way I respond to people. So I think the first step is just start thinking about that. Like, what are the things that, if I'm sad or if I'm overwhelmed or if I'm guilty, like, what are the things that I do? Like, how does it manifest in me? And when you know of those specific things, then it's easier to be like, how can I deal with this? So for example, like if I'm anxious and that anxiety is turning into like me lashing out at people, like yelling at people or like, getting into fights at home or something like that, then we can be like, okay, this is how my anxiety is manifesting. Now, how can I correct the work on this? Like, maybe if I'm starting to get anxious and I notice those things, I can just remove myself. I can go and, like quickly pray, or I can go do some dhikr, or I can, go and just kind of take some deep breaths and or go take a walk outside. And that's what kind of grounding is. The concept of grounding really is when you allow yourself to be mindful of your current state in that specific moment. And like I said, we don't do that all the time. But if you're mindful of yourself in that current moment, then then it gives you more of a sense of how I can deal with this. So again, even just taking some and you can practice this like at any point, not just when you're anxious or sad or stressed. You can practice this when you're happy or when you're, excited. You can take a step back and be like, oh, wow, like I'm happy. I'm like giving people hugs. Like that's how I show my happiness. And, so just allowing yourself to be conscious of that, I think is the most important thing, because we negate that in moments of hardship. But I think that's like a common practice we can all just kind of start out with.
I'll piggyback off of that. I think definitely trying to figure out what stress response you might be locked in right now, because majority of us are locked in a stress response just because of how overwhelmed we are, again, with our day-to-day lives, with what's going on in Palestine, with just life in general. And I can briefly go over them, but you're either probably in fight or flight, which like Imaan was talking about, is if you're going around and you're having tantrums, if you're being aggressive, if you're yelling at the barista at a coffee shop for pretty much no reason at all. You might be in fight or flight. If you are in freeze, you might be, dissociating. You might feel really numb or really withdrawn. People might say things to you like you haven't been yourself lately. Maybe you just feel like you're kind of dimming your light because you just don't feel like you have any light to bring to the table right now. Time can just feel either really, really fast or really, really slow. It's a really just numb state. And then there's also the state of fawning, which is when you actually are just running around taking care of everybody else and you're neglecting yourself, right? And I think with that one, it's sometimes hard to find that balance, because in our deen, in our religion, we're super encouraged to take care of other people. Character and kindness and caring for others, that was one of the biggest characteristics of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Make sure if you're listening, you say sallallahu alaihi wasallam when you hear his name. And so, you want to take care of other people too, but also if you're running around taking care of other people all the time and you're neglecting yourself, you are going to fall apart. So that might be the first thing of like, which state am I locked in? Which one do I feel like I'm gravitating towards now? It could be a mix of all three. And then, like you said, being intentional. That's one of the biggest things. If you want to heal your nervous system, you want to heal, or change your way of thinking or whatever it might be. SubhanAllah, research is showing that presence is like one of the biggest things. Because if you're not present, what are you doing? You're either ruminating about things that have happened in the past, you're super anxious, you're replaying it's probably going to be negative things that have occurred in your life, or you're freaking out about the future. You might be just emotionally paralyzed about something that hasn't even happened yet. You're thinking about something that hasn't even happened. You're 5 years into the future, and you're living in the present moment like you're 5 years into the future. So just talking about it is exhausting, but
thinking about it is exhausting too. And I know a lot of us do this.
Yeah, so, exactly. So it's just like a constant thing, and then you're thinking like that all the time, and then your body's super stressed out. Of course, you're not going to feel like yourself. Of course, you're going to feel drained. Of course, it's going to feel really, really heavy. And so, being present is actually the biggest thing to helping us heal. Of whatever it is that I'm doing right now, I'm going to be in the moment. So that could look like reducing screen time. I don't know who needs to hear this out there. It's probably all of us, but you should not be on Instagram 24/7. You should not be on Snapchat 24/7. I'm not saying you have to take a huge social media break, because obviously we want to be on there consistently posting about Palestine, but it is not healthy for you to be watching people being bombed and people starving and people screaming and yelling all of the time. And I think that there's a lot of guilt surrounding that. We can get into that in a second, inshallah. But for you to just turn it off and take a break from your screens, because just staring at a screen stresses out the body. Doing stuff that just makes you feel connected to yourself and helps you tap into your creativity, whether it's journaling or spending time in nature or stretching. This is a really big thing. All of our muscles right now are really stressed out and could use some stretching. Or even if you look at, like you were saying, like prayer, like now research is showing how meditation is so helpful. Like salah is meditation, for you to be praying and for you to connect with the words of Allah, to connect with the Quran. And may Allah allow us to reach the month of Ramadan. Like you were saying, that's one of the biggest things. And for you to do your athqad, your morning and evening supplications, and for you to do dhikr, and for you to just be fully present with your life and yourself and with God, that every time, Allah's calling us 5 times a day to talk to him. And this is when we disconnect from the dunya. This is when we disconnect from life. Every single time you are raising your hands in the air and you are saying Allahu Akbar, you're saying Allah is greater. Allah is greater than my pain. Allah is greater than my family, financial, relationship, friend, job issues. Allah is greater than whatever it is that's consuming my mind right now. Allah is greater than the genocide that is happening. And to just let everything out on the prayer mat. But I think to just kind of sum it all up, identifying where you're at right now, what is it that's going on with you? What stress response are you locked in? And then what steps can I take to move forward to take care of myself? And I'm going to be fully present while doing it. I'm not going to be doing it and be like, oh, where's my birth certificate? I'm going to be like completely and utterly present in whatever it is that I'm doing.
No. Again, great points. Stealing my questions again, which is a little bit like you're jumping ahead. I'm kidding.
It all ties in together.
No,
it
honestly,
really
it
does.
Because that's just kind of how everything has been. I mean, everything is just tying into one after another, and it's just feels like a mess at some points, right?
Yeah.
So,
and often I feel like we are trying to look for answers of like, how can we ease this anxiety? How can we bring ourselves back down? And it's tough because there's not a clear cut necessarily answer to that, and it looks different for everyone. But I think some of these points that kind of like Mayce brought up, and we were sharing about intentionality and being present, are things that we often overlook. But it's so important for us to continually practice, because sometimes it is that which can really help us kind of move forward and just take care of ourselves.
Exactly. One of the last things I wanted to talk about before we have to let Mayce go in a few is boundaries. I know we talked about social media a little bit, and we could touch on that a little bit as well. But again, just drawing back on some of our personal experiences within the community, people have been like struggling with. I know some revert friends have been struggling with their parents. The parents are not understanding and creating those boundaries of like, I love my parents, but they're not understanding this. And like, I remember, actually, I won't bring up a personal example, but just how can we navigate within each other? Just because we do have differing opinions, differing ways of going about this. There's no one right way of doing it, but how can we perceive and adjust our boundaries, social media wise, personally, in the community? Do you guys have any insight on that?
That's a good question, because I know it's hard, of course, to be navigating other people, especially, a lot of people who might not share, either experience or just opinions. And it can be frustrating, especially when it comes to genocide, of course. It can be really hard. And, one thing that I will tie in that we kind of spoke about in our previous conversation, I think, if we do, if we do interact with people who really share differences with us, like it can be something that gets really overwhelming or just really anxiety provoking in that moment. And in that moment, we might, depending on, you know, how our anxiety is manifesting or frustration or anger, like we might tend to like lash out, or it might be like, you know, just internalize it or whatever the case may be. Like, I know that we all have different ways to respond in those moments. And so I think one of the biggest and best things to do in that moment is, again, just check in with yourself in that moment, because I think there's so many different ways that our body or our mind might want us to respond right away or react right away that, you know, may or may not be like harmful to us. And I think like it can be really frustrating when we can't control that other person. And I think that's something to really keep in mind, is that we can't control others' reactions, responses, what they do, but we can control ourselves. Like we can control how we react. We can control how we just respond to our own anxieties and fears and anger. And so I think the biggest thing in that moment is just really take that step back and be like, how am I feeling right now? And what is the best and most appropriate way that I can respond in this moment that is best for myself, you know, and that will take care of myself, because it is really hard. And I think sometimes that reminder that we give ourselves of that we can't control that other person is, you know, sometimes helpful, because I think, you know, it shows us that, you know, there not always is something we can do, but, you know, we can really take care of ourselves. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I would also say, and this is a very situational thing. Yeah. It's going to vary for every person, every situation, but to also limit contact with people who don't respect your boundaries and people who dismiss you or make you feel unseen or unheard or unappreciated, or it's just like, if you go and you're going to talk to them, you know that you're just going to leave and you're not going to be feeling well. For you to really prioritize and surround yourself with people, like I was saying earlier, people who feel like an exhale and people who feel safe. And, you know, what is it to feel safe with somebody? It's a series of positive experiences. It's looking at somebody knowing that when I'm around you, I can say what I want. I can say how I feel. I can say how I'm doing. I don't have to filter it. And I know that I'm going to walk out and I'm going to leave that gathering feeling like my heart's been revived and my body has just been rejuvenated. And I think that's a good rule of thumb when it comes to figuring out who it is that you want to surround yourself with right now in these really, really heavy times, is that pay attention to the sensations of in your body when you're around people. Do you feel that when you're around certain people that there's like tension in your jaw or your chest, or you might feel it in your stomach? It might feel like your heart is sinking to your stomach. Are you overly conscious of yourself, like filtering yourself and feeling like I can't be authentic, or just kind of feels like I'm walking on eggshells around people right now? I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to do the wrong thing, because that puts more stress on your body. And if we haven't already made it clear, there's enough stress on all of our bodies. So to surround yourself with people who just make you feel good and make you laugh and make you feel like you can process with them, you can talk with them, you can share the good and the bad with all of them. And the people who don't, I'm not encouraging anybody to cut anybody out of their lives, but for you to keep it at a minimum.
Yeah. And I think if some of the biggest things we can take away from, you know, even just kind of like these last questions is, one is just being intentional in how we look at ourselves and look at our bodies and our responses, like whether it be physical, whether it be emotional, and also just the importance of being present and how we can do that. And I know Mayce spoke a little bit about that earlier, of how we can encourage ourselves to be present and practice those things, even when we're not necessarily in a state of anxiety or sadness. Those are really two things that might seem easy, but really often neglected and not thought about. So really important to practice.
For sure. Any lasting remarks from you, Mayce, just before you have to head out?
Yeah. I'm trying to end it off on a more hopeful note. I think it's also remember for each and every single one of us to keep our eyes on the prize. Life is really short, but it feels really long, and it feels really long right now. It's interesting because the Quran will talk about how when we are in the next life, inshallah, when we go to our, inshallah, Jannah, our actual home, it's going to feel like this whole entire life was just like a morning, or, you know,
blur,
And now I'm like, well, it just feels so long. It feels like I've been out here forever and I'm going to be here forever. But to remember that when we hold on to the rope of Allah, when we take care of ourselves, when we practice healthy self-care habits, and we don't lose hope. And that's the biggest thing, because this is a very, very hopeless world that we are living in. When you look at the people of Palestine, what's the first thing that comes out of their mouths when their houses are being bombed, when they've lost their parents, their children, their spouse, their grandparents? Hasbi Allah wa ni'mal wakil. Allah is sufficient for me. Allah is the best disposer of my affairs. How are they surviving right now? It's literally holding on to the rope of Allah. And subhanAllah, like, you know, it's a really horrible, heavy thing that's happening, but look at the amount of people that have come to Allah. Look at the amount of people that have come to Islam. Like, people are looking at these people and they're like, how is it that somebody is smiling? I mean, it's a broken smile and you can see the pain in their eyes, but how is it that somebody just lost their house and they're smiling and they're like, I'm good. We're good. We don't need you guys. We don't need the world. The world turned its back on us, but we're okay. It is literally because they are holding on to the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It does not end here. It does not here. Allah sees, Allah knows. He knows what's going on. He knows our pain. He knows the heaviness in our heart. And the same Allah that knows is the same Allah that can mend. Right? One of his names is Al-Jabbar, the one who mends, the one who can take all of the broken pieces inside of you and mend it back together and create something beautiful. And so to know that it doesn't end here, there is a world where, as the Prophet ﷺ said, things that no eye has ever seen, no ear has ever heard, and no thought has ever experienced. And that world is waiting for us. If we just capitalize on the rewards right now, if we just hold on, if we take a page out of the book of the people of Gaza, I'm chilling. Whatever happens, I'm chilling. I know that I'm going to be compensated for my pain. Sometimes we might feel like we might not have anything to hold on to but Jannah. But guess what? Jannah is all we need to keep that hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And inshallah, may Allah again allow us to reach the month of Ramadan, to utilize this Ramadan, to always keep them in our du'as, and to capitalize on the rewards and allow that to be a month of healing for us. Inshallah.
Ameen.
Inshallah, Ameen. Jazakallah khair for all your words. I appreciate you taking out the time. Inshallah, we'll see you soon. I know you have class right now, so we'll let you go. But
running late, actually.
It's okay. It's okay. A little fast driving.
Yes. Yeah, Fast and Furious.
Don't drive fast. Don't drive fast. But inshallah, we'll talk to you guys soon.
Yes.
Yeah. Jazakallah khair for all of you guys watching. I know it's been a lot to take in just the past few months, so thank you for taking your time out, and hopefully this was of some benefit. That's kind of just our goal in general. Imaan can attest to this as well. Inshallah, this is our first video episode, so inshallah you'll be seeing more of us. Maybe we could talk a little bit better too as the video starts, but it's been a long few months, and inshallah I'm really looking forward to Ramadan and looking forward to the opportunities we have to connect with one another, connect with our community, and just expand past ourselves. We've been doing immense work as a community, and I'm really proud of this community. But again, it's important to have these outlets and spaces. Inshallah, we could provide that for you guys. And yeah.
Yeah, and just make sure you just stay tuned to future episodes. Inshallah, we'll have more speakers on. We'll have just different topics on different mental health topics, as well as some question and answer sessions as well. And so inshallah, there's a lot to look forward to. We did want to say about this episode as well. I know we talked about some really heavy topics, and again, just please make sure that you are taking care of yourself throughout this time, and whatever that might look like. If you need to step away and take some breaks as you're listening, or kind of just engaging in some of this content as well, we really encourage that. And make sure you're also connecting with family and friends as well, and utilizing these support systems, whether it be people in your life, whether it be even just reaching out to therapeutic resources as well. We think it's really important. Also, if you want more connections to resources within our Chicagoland community, please feel free to go on our Project Taqwa website at www.projecttaqwa.org, where we have just kind of like a list of resources. We have our link tree as well, in which there's resources where you can donate to different organizations, whether it be ours, and inshallah, please donate if you can, but as well as other Palestinian organizations as well. So please go ahead and take a look at that as well.
Sounds good. Inshallah, see you guys soon.
All right.
Salam, guys.
Assalamualaikum.